Chapter 5. Beginning of Mysteries. Questions surged in my mind. They beat at my consciousness. They turned me in my dreams and made me stumble when I walked. Everyone thought that I was deep in my preparations to meet the learned priests of the temple. Indeed, everyone who knew my task was interested, but, of course, this was limited to the Brotherhood. My mother did not know the reason for my intense studies, but thought I was suddenly turned orthodox in Jewry, and was secretly pleased with me. Of course, the Brotherhood hoped that I would succeed, for what a faith it would give. In the order to know that a 12-year-old Essene could be master to the mightiest priests of the Jews. In the beginning, verily, I harbored thought of pride, the pride I would take in such a conquest. But soon, by gentle questions and mere suggestions, my father and the patriarch of the Brotherhood made me see that there was a higher opportunity, a greater responsibility, a higher destiny. Yet I know not how they made me feel this, for never one word of this greater duty passed their calm and gentle lips. It was as if I took the meaning from their unspoken thoughts. How this could be was one of the many questions that surged in my mind. Indeed, I studied hard upon the orthodox thoughts of the Jews. But I was not truly concerned, for in 2 years I could have memorized every scroll of the laws of prophets, and almost did. My beautiful mother often. I hinted the question to my superiors in the Nezar Essenes, Ishmael, and said that I knew more of the books than did her father and her 2 elder brothers, and all 3 were priests. But the questions in my eager mind could not be answered from the writings of a narrow people. They could be quenched only by drinking of the living water of the knowledge of pure truth. And at that moment, my father was the spigot behind which all of the knowledge was locked. I knew that there was no way I could get him to open more than he thought was best for me. How was it possible for man to be in 2 places at one time? How was it possible for that man in one place to be firmly asleep, so firmly asleep that he could not be awakened, and in the other place to be compelling, masterful, and capable of divine action and anger? Habakkuk both answered with a flat statement that it was impossible. I said no more, for I did not want my quarterly report to be unfavorable for deviating from the established beliefs. I was curious about the Great White Brotherhood and the Order of Melchizedek, but I dared not mention those names to anyone of my squadron. However, my annual review and rating brought me to the presence of the Patriarch. Something drove me to speak to him about so strange a subject. "Sir, do you know of the Great White Brotherhood?" His eyes did not flinch, his brow did not wrinkle, but I felt a sudden surge in his emotions, and if my father had not painstakingly taught me never to fear, I would have fled from the place. But he was quiet so long and sat, so immobile, that I stammered, "Do you belong to the Great White Brotherhood, sir?" "To which of the 12? His words took me by surprise, so that I couldn't find words. At last I pressed on. Maybe I dreamed it, or imagined the name, Order of Melchizedek. It bothers me that I know nothing about them, sir." "You would not dream about them unless you wanted to know." "Sir, how could I find out about them?" "Should I ask someone?" "Son, you might, but the answer would be the same from every man. He who does not belong might say he does, but could not help you. He who does belong would never say that he does." "Why?" "These orders are secret and more, sacred than your breath. No man can ever admit he belongs, for the instant he starts to admit it, that instant he ceases to belong." My look of incredulity brought a touch of a smile to his lips. I blurted, "But sir, how could the order be filled? H? How could the younger men be—" I stopped short when I saw the look of amusement. "Sir, is there no way I can find out about these organizations?" The Patriarch was old, for many said that he was in truth the Son of Righteousness, hidden from his enemies in our compound, but he seemed quite young when he smiled. His skin was translucent, and he seemed to be wrapped in a serenity and radiance that knew no age, and my father was the only other person who was so serene and so radiant. "It depends." "Sir, son, when you came to the Essenes, you were asked if you would take an oath on which you would stake your life." "Yes, master." "Would you be willing to risk your life to gain knowledge of these orders?" "Without knowing anything about them first, sir?" "Yes." "Without knowing anyone who belongs to them, sir?" "That too." "Without knowing what they teach or what they stand for?" "Yes, that and more also." I hesitated, but not for long. My father had taught that fear was a trap that stops all hope of progress. I would risk my life, sir. He sat quite still for a very long time, and I dared not move. I almost held my breath. That was all, nothing more. He instantly turned to other matters, such as my lack of skill at ciphering and composition, and gently urged me to improve them. I promised to try and was dismissed with a silent nod. I verily was silent and deeply puzzled all that day and all the next, until after the tabernacle studies I arrived at the shop to work with my father and learn from him about the religions and about healing. He was doweling a lovely panel of... At last he spoke. Then you have my permission to mention this conversation to your father. Sun-bleached cedar when I came in. It was very exacting work, but such was my impatience that I blurted, "Do you belong to the Great White Brotherhood?" "Which of the 12? His hand at that moment pulled the paneling into exact alignment. It was as if he had been expecting my question. "Yesterday the master gave me permission to speak to you about..." "Explain to me in 3 sentences, what is the difference between the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Essenes concerning the Messiah?" The Pharisees, the Sadducees, these interpret the scriptures of the prophet literally and physically. They expect a physical Messiah who will save their nation. The Zealots believe to prepare his coming by use of force. The Essenes interpret the prophecy as scriptural allegories and consider them to be divine secrets earnestly proffered. Whence came the beliefs of the Orthodox Jews and of the Essenes? Both came from the priests of the sun and the time of Amenhotep IV, the Egyptian priest king, and were transferred to the Jews by the high priest Moses. Since they came from the same source, why are the beliefs not the same? The Jews have strayed toward the physical. They would make divine law, that law by which the culture is ordered and controlled. The Essenes have leaned toward the spiritual, but order and control the culture by supervision of training and of daily activity. Which is more perfect? That which is nearer to the spiritual. Of Pharisees, what is their dominant trait? Withdrawal, unfortunately, coupled with hypocrisy. They pretend to follow to the very limit the ancient laws. In truth, they are but proud and arrogant, and keep to themselves from pride and disdain. Of the Essenes, what is their dominant trait? Withdrawal too, but they retire in order to follow their beliefs more fully. No man is permitted to join who has not taken an oath to keep their beliefs secret and not reveal their sacred teachings. They also believe that by withdrawal they may live the purer life needed to ready their eternal souls for bliss after death. Like the Pharisees, the Essenes are withdrawn? Yes, but without hypocrisy. Should we say, with less hypocrisy? Son, or do you think the Essenes are perfect? Oh no, Father, they do not include women and fear them, saying that women are emotional and seldom faithful to one man. Therefore the priests of Zadok have no offspring and must surely die out. Is this wise and just? No, Father, perhaps in all history shall be probably more short-sighted than the false belief of the Jew in his superiority, because God spoke to his ancestor on the mountain. We know from records that God did not give the 10 Commandments, but that Moshe took them from the early Egyptian laws. While we talked, we finished the careful doweling and began to assemble the loose boards into one tightly held whole. My father assembled my ideas into one sudden and massive idea. Have not the Essenes 4 steps in their learning? Is not a lifetime of work and learning required for the average man to attain to the height of the 4th degree? Is it not all they can expect to master with continuous effort? Therefore, is not our order carefully adjusted to meet the demands but stay within the reach of the average man? Yet, once in a while, a special one comes, one who has limitless capacity to learn, an insight which cannot be taught. Such a one learns as if taught by angels. The mind of such a man may go down with the details of his life or upward to the laws of heaven. If such a blessed one turns his mind to the eternal Father, he soon becomes purified, weathered ready, just as these boards which make up this mighty tabletop were first weathered in shadow, then tortured and bleached in the desert sun. No board knew its destiny, but now, in its perfected place, it holds all other boards in true harmony and with great strength. Could these tried and tested boards not resemble the members of the Great White Brotherhood? The learning of man goes back to its supreme source. It is how he interprets the eternal wisdom and governs his thoughts and actions. As the Jew has turned to physical laws and to human control, the Essene has turned to spiritual laws and human control without coercion. Could it be that a still higher learning would turn to spiritual laws free from all control of mind or being? Could it be that a higher learning would turn to training all of the people rather than those who chose to join the Brotherhood? If so, would they who are members thereof be in hazard of property and life? To raise the question from the physical, let us look upon this table. As long as these boards were unselected and unassembled, no man could physically destroy this table, for it was only in mental form. That which exists only in the mental and spiritual realm cannot be destroyed on the physical. Therefore, what greater safety for a great secret order than this? It was never assembled, or it never was known. In organization, there is physical strength, but is there mental and spiritual strength? When the Master of Righteousness took from the failing hands of the Maccabees the Sadduc priesthood and made it into an organization like unto a church, he built into the Essene order the seed of its own destruction. If anyone sets a limit upon an organization, measured to the height of the ability of the common man, does he not measure it to a shroud of mediocrity, to be worn even throughout eternity? Of such proportion are all churches which found their faith on belief that their powers came directly from God. This includes temples and synagogues. He was silent while we placed the heavy, smooth sandstones upon the surface of the table and began to grind and polish the wood to an exacting tolerance and a high gloss. When we were finished, I knew the surface would be one beautiful, masterly made, inlaid whole. While an organization is death to the exceptional mind, it is birth and security to the ordinary man. Therefore, he must be protected and used for the benefit of all mankind. But he who would know true divinity must never admit any limit upon his freedom or to his abilities or skill. He must, in the end, become his own teacher and his own priest, for to him all other teachers or priests must be false. Could it be that a person becomes a member of the Great White Brotherhood the instant he can personally become his own spiritual teacher? Could it be that there is no physical organization to which he may belong, yet he may be a member? Could it be that man may rise by the drive of his own being ever higher and higher, until he commands the very angels themselves to do his bidding? There was a silence except for the sound of the heavy sandstones moving backward and forward under our hands. Over beyond the compound, upon the flat area in the curve of the river, I saw the squadron which was serving in the field gathering to return to the assembly hall. Beyond our house, on the sudden small hill that formed our backyard, I heard a lark caroling from the top of a tamarisk tree. The fragrance of bread came from the hearth where Mother and Mary B. were baking. This was so earthy, so familiar, so beloved, yet I was haunted by a feeling that my Father was telling me more than I could grasp, and yet even that was not enough. Father, how could anyone be in two places at one time? Above the Essenes, there may be a great white brotherhood. Above or intermingled with the great white brotherhood, there may be an order of Melchizedek. Above them all, there may be that other order which is too sacred to be named, too holy to be limited, too wondrous to be defined? If there is, do you suppose those who have earned the right to know would call it the order of no name, or simply the order of the sun? And do you suppose that if there are such orders, and I have not said that there were, they would not have some special training program to aid their candidates? The thrill that went through me was like a sudden chill. My wonderful Father never failed to teach me by raising my mind and my emotional understanding to a new level, and the promise of his words was like honey to my tongue. Go, son, go find John, and you two prepare yourself with a warm robe and a heavy blanket. Tell your mother that you are going for 3 days into the far field so that she will neither worry nor wonder, then come quickly. Neither you nor John have undergone the 3 days of trial in the rock manger of the isolation grotto. This you must do according to the perfect master. Today your mind is ready for that experience. Go. Normally it was the custom of the Essenes to put each candidate through a severe series of trials, one of which was his death and resurrection to the world of movement, light, sound, and feeling. We had been told by many of our brothers that it was a grueling experience. Now suddenly it was our turn. We presented ourselves to the master of the caves, wound through the narrow tunnel under the compound, climbed the steps in the underground tunnel, and came to the first crypt. It was not much larger than a man cut in stone, and another giant stone was arranged so that it would roll into place. In the depths of the cavern no sound came, and from the tunnel to the mouth of the cave there was a fresh movement of air. When John was safely placed upon his stone bed, I was taken onward to the darker recesses of the grotto to another manger. I was told to wrap myself in a blanket and lie upon the smooth stones where so many other candidates had lain. A moment later, the stone was moved into place, and I was alone in the depths of the earth. There was neither sight in the blackness nor sound in the grotto. I stretched my hands and could touch the cool stones of the back wall and the front wall. Above me I knew there was a stone roof a little higher than my reach when standing. It was like being closed in a tomb except for the openings at the tops of each side through which air could come. The crypt was much like a feed trough at the front of the stall where we fed our cattle. This was of stone, not wood, and it was longer and deeper, but it was also closed on two ends and almost closed on both sides. The series of experiences that awaited me in the hours to come reached beyond all written words to relate. How then could one who is ever poor at composition make you feel the magnificence of the mystery? The experiences themselves must have been only in the mind. No physical body could have risen from that tomb-like crypt. Yet the experiences turned into a greater reality than the stones upon which I lay with my arms flung out to each side so that my body formed a cross. The events came by stages which were well marked and set apart, yet each melted into the other. The events were trivial, but the total effect reminded me of threshing in a strong wind, where no straw is large, but soon they have built into a stack that covers a broad area. The first stage was physical. I was acutely aware of the cool stones, of the rough wool of the blanket, and the warmth of my cotton robe. I found the heel holes gouged in the stone, and I touched the rough texture of the rock with my fingertips. Then the feeling of sleep began to steal over me, and it rose like a gentle warmth from within my being. How long I slept I do not now know, but suddenly I was wide awake, aware of the feeling of hunger in my being. My stomach panged, growled, and churned, and my head throbbed until I could count each shuddering heartbeat. A calmness then began to settle over my being, and with it the physical sense of sleep. But the sleep was intermittent or intertwined with all the other experiences. Slowly I began to weary, a straining at my physical senses. There was no light, nothing to hear. My mind began to turn inward and drifted toward an indefinable but definite second stage of my experience. In the second stage I seemed to be all mind. I recalled my lessons over the years, resaid the Psalms of the Essenes, and at last turned to the teachings of my father. Then I recalled the words and actions of my beautiful mother and how she had made me worry and wonder. But at last I turned to the special teachings of my father concerning the learnings of the initiate and recalled with exactness each point of his years of careful instruction. Then, out of all I selected these as being the most important, he had taught me how to breathe so that I enhanced the power within my body, then how to become still, calm, and at peace, and increase this relaxation with every breath. He had taught me never to make a positive or antagonizing statement if a question could be used. Under no condition could an initiate argue, condemn, or find fault, but must look for the good and the beauty in everything. One could never show his prowess or ability or take money for work in the sacred field, nor could one ever force ideas upon another, even knowing he was right and knowing the other was wrong. For a higher law operated in this relationship which could make the right wrong and the wrong right. No matter what the emotional, mental, or religious plight of anyone, the initiate could not give aid until asked to do so. He must never attack the faith of anyone or undermine his confidence in his faith, nor could he give a good faith to replace a bad until he was asked to do so. Every man must earn his own way by physical work. Teaching was a privilege for which no pay could ever be taken. But my father had given me instruction in a still higher plane. It was clear that nothing could be done of one's own self except that it become the channel for the use of the universal power of the Father, who is in heaven. Therefore, the initiate could have no emotional participation with anyone, that is, he could be neither attached nor detached to anything or any person beyond the requirements of his life duty. However, these duties required a certain amount of love, and it was the duty of the initiate also to meet this quota of love and attachment. Yet no matter what the relationship, no personal opinion could be imposed upon another by use of the will, or by thought, or by crafty persuasion for personal gain of any kind. Yet there had been higher teachings, and dimly in my mind I realized that my wonderful Father had guided me down a rocky highway and never let me stumble. No man could reach the summit of learning and knowing who did not become his own teacher and his own priest. Organization was death to the exceptional mind, but birth and security to the mediocre mind. Success is not important. Doing is all that is important, for duty is more important by far than achievement or success. Thoughts are things of weight and substance. Properly used and controlled, they can kill, cure, destroy, or save. And this was the basis of his wonderful healing, which he taught to me. With all my faith in my own religion, I must never be blind to the value of another's faith, for no religion or church or group had all the good, or all the knowledge, and there is not nor ever will be a religion higher than truth. Oh, how he had repeated this to me, there is not now nor ever will be a religion higher than truth. And within the framework of truth there were symbol pictures which had meanings made clear only to the mind that continued upward on the spiral of learning. Beyond the religion of the Jew, for instance, was the faith and practice of the Essenes. Above the Essenes was a mythical brotherhood. Above this the order of Melchizedek, and still above this an order so sacred, so secret, that it was given no name. As I thought upon these things, I grew more and more excited, more pleased with my training, and grateful to my Father. But with this excitement, and carried by it, there came an exalted exhaustion of memory and brain, so that my thoughts began to slow down and to spin out of the control of my conscious will. Suddenly, I would find that I was not thinking upon the subject of my deliberate choosing, but upon something that had slipped into my mind and would not be rooted out. In fact, it began to seem that I had two minds, one obedient to my conscious control and the other obedient to its own truth. I fought for control, but there was no sight or sound on which I could orient myself, and as soon as I drifted toward rest, my mind would spin off to its own delight. At last I had wearied until I could not think, nor could I even move my fingers to touch the cool stone. I lay as if suspended in time and space, neither thinking nor not thinking. Suddenly, a rainbow of light, jagged and fast as a lightning stroke, slashed through my head in colors so strong that I saw them with my physical eyes. It was so beautiful that I cried out with the joy of seeing the vibrant rainbow of color. Surely anyone who has seen such glory would know why the rainbow is said to be God's promise to man. I was gripped and held by the flashing beauty of light, and my thoughts were utterly stilled in fascination, so that I could not think or move. Somewhere in the primal essence of my being, I was enormously aware of the oncoming experience, but in no way prepared for the turn it took. Instantly, without warning, the color was covered as if with a blanket of gloomy black. It was as if soot had been thrown upon a radiant fire. The stunning shock rocked my senses and made me a little fearful. Out of the smoldering soot rose phantoms like nightmares. Every doubt or weakness in my mind or character seemed to well up in a horrifying physical form to accuse and plague me. Devils of black doubt and terrible depression raked and tortured me. My very bones hurt from the impact of this emotional ordeal. I tried to escape, but was almost unable to move, and could only curl myself in a small ball, cover my head, and shake with sobbing. But the demons came on, goading me with a remorse for things both done and undone. I wept in pity for myself, and then in detestation for my life. I moaned with the pain of seeing myself in pitiless truth, pounded upon the stone, and shouted for relief from the torture of those inward-visioned memories. But there was no relief, no help, no interlude, until my strength failed, and I fell into a torpor of exhaustion and could no longer think or see. Later it could have been a moment or an eternity. I was jerked awake by the gay singing of a lark and the lowing of cattle. The sound was so clear and beautiful, I laughed aloud and then wept to hear. Ears denied sound had brought memories made sweet by the hunger of time. Then I began to hear voices, whispering at first, and there were words well-spoken and songs, then many voices caroling in full-throated happiness. The sound was more than a heart could stand of happiness, and again I wept for the sheer joy of weeping, until I was again exhausted and seemed to sleep. My waking was like a jolt of landing. I felt as if I had fallen from a height, and every cell of my body was tingling, as if it had been asleep and now waked to painful life. In that mystical recess of being, I felt the presence of my wonderful Father and secret Master. They seemed to be helping me to rise upward, upward, ever upward. The emotional upsurge within me was like a warm hath of flame beginning inwardly, to rise slowly from the center of my being toward my heart. The fullness of the pressure was beyond pain or joy. It was limitless expansion that leapt beyond sense and then suddenly thrust inward and outward at the same time. A blue light seemed to explode out of my heart, transfer to the center of my chest, and then surge relentlessly upward, ever expanding as it rose. The upward moving light rose of its own energy, just as it had come into being of its own creation, without parent in desire, mother in emotion, or father in thought. I knew nothing of what to expect, and lay as one in a sleep, lethargic, suspended, immovable. All events seemed to be happening to another person. The rising light touched my throat, and the sound of singing and joy filled the manger. Then the surging light reached my head in the crypt, and cavern of the grotto was lit with a wondrous light. I could see unbelievable details, even the very particles that held the stones together. Even as I looked, I felt that I stood outside the crypt enwrapped in a violet mist, but I was held to my petrified body inside the tomb by a cord of silvery white. Sight had become all important. I saw beyond the confines of the cave, beyond the barriers of time. It seemed that I saw that which neither had been, was, nor was yet to come, and yet was all three. And I was aware that both my father and the patriarch were beside me. It was as if they had lifted me out of myself and now held me against the pull of the silvery cord which led back to my body inside the crypt. Then I saw the tall, gray-haired young man who looked so much like my father, who came toward me through the purple mist across the endless ocean. He stepped from his sailing ship and held out his hand. He spoke, and his words thundered through space. "I am a Tin Man. Come with me to Britain and to see Caer Gaur, or the Stonehenge in the town of Glass." How sweet, how inviting was the smile on his face, and oh, how I wanted to go with him. But I found that I could not move forward. The pull upon the silvery cord was now growing greater and greater. I cried out with the pain, but I was torn from the hands of my father and the secret master and was pulled backward toward my prostrate body in the manger of the grotto. My conscious senses began to awaken. I was dimly conscious of falling and striking my body and then being absorbed by it. In my physical body, I felt again that tingling in every fiber, as if a million needles had prickled my flesh. Then my consciousness grew until I was aware that my eyes were open and there was not absolute blackness in the crypt, but the light was so faint that I could not be certain that I saw the flickering with my physical eyes, and I thought that again my senses had spun out of control in yet another direction. But at last I was certain, for the nerves of my eyes began to screech their protest. Yes, I was awake! I heard the sound of voices singing in the grotto, joyous harmonies of the beloved psalm of the Essenes. Their words were, "Oh, I give praise to the Heavenly Father, for He has fashioned a wonder from the dust and shown forth His mighty power in that which He molded from clay. He has made me to know the deep, deep truth and to understand His wondrous works. He has put into my mouth the power to praise, and on my tongue the words of psalms, and given to my willing lips the readiness of songs with which to sing His loving kindness, and constantly, both night and day, recall His might and bless His name." Recall His might and bless His name. "I will show forth His glory to the sons of men, and in His abundant goodness my soul shall greatly exult, knowing that in His hand is bounty, in His thought all knowledge, and His power all might, and all glory and all truth. He has given to my willing lips the readiness of songs with which to sing His loving kindness, and constantly, both night and day, recall His might and bless His name. Recall His might and bless His name." The caroling Essenes had stopped afar to sing and to let my eyes become adjusted to the light. By stages they advanced, and the singing grew ever louder and louder until the group was outside my crypt, and the light was streaming into the upper part of the manger. The pain in my eyes had become ever less, but still was great when I heard the grunts of my brothers straining to lift the stone that closed the tomb. As the stone was raised and rolled away, the light from the many tapers came in upon me, flooding the crypt with light. Dimly, through the tears in my straining eyes, I could see the brothers banked in great circles that extended beyond the light. There must have been 100 of the advanced Essenes in their shining white robes. As they saw me, they began singing in sweet joy the song of rising, and the words were, Sing, for the Lord of heaven has to mortals given the love for which they've striven, that glory which they desire. Sing, for the Lord of earth has proved to man his worth, the value of human birth, and the glorious inner fire. How good were my brothers, how sweet to work through their rest period, so that they could bathe and dress early, struggle through the tunnels and up the long stairs to greet me on my waking from what was called the tomb. But how unreal their solid physical forms seemed. How inadequate was the human light to one who had seen with higher sight. My eyes had beheld the realities greater than their too solid flesh, and a light more adequate than a million suns. How very unreal the actual seemed. How actual the insubstantial was in my memory. The singing rose to great height, and then into shouts and hurrahs as I stepped forth from the tomb. A dozen eager hands reached to help and steady me. Then practiced hands whisked away my robe and my blanket, and I was bathed with water from enormous jars which they had carried all that way, then rinsed with cold water and then with special spiced oil, and it was lathed upon me. Behold the robe of your glory. Master Habakkuk said these words and held forth to me the coveted new linen robe, snowy white and glistening. When I had clothed myself, I was handed a golden goblet filled with milk into which honey had been dissolved. Even as I drank, the energy flowed back into my limbs. Soon I again began to touch the actual which was around me. The exaltation and joy of each of my brothers was communicated to me, for only they who had passed through the experience were permitted to come to see the candidate risen from the dead. They knew something of the sensations that no words could convey, and I felt their goodwill like the warmth of a fire. Truly, at that moment, I learned the meaning of brotherly love. John had been awakened from his crypt by another group, even though he had resisted his awakening. So great was his pleasure in the experiences of inward withdrawal that from that moment he was changed. As we moved along in stately processional, returning towards the steps and the exit from the cave, he whispered, "Oh, such bliss! I want to be a therapeute." Within the Essenes there were some who married, though this was not approved in every compound. There were also those who loved to withdraw into the solitude and complete retirement from mankind, to meditate and pray in constant seclusion. These sought the far places of the desert and tried to live undisturbed in their constant contact with the indwelling being. Such were called therapeutes, and most were indeed devout and holy men, much admired by all the others. We were led into the midst of the assembly hall just as all the brothers assembled for the feast of love. We stood before the secret master and my father for blessings and special prayers, and to learn the kiss of the brotherhood by which we could make ourselves known to all brothers in all lands anywhere. And as we were taught, my father's eyes were upon mine as if he searched my very soul to see if I had garnered understanding and wisdom from the experience. As I worked with him under the direction of the secret master, I whispered to him softly, "Thank you, Father. It was more real than actual flesh. I have at last, I know at last how one may be in two places at one time." A hint of a smile touched his fine lips, and as he embraced me in a practice demonstration, he whispered in my ear, "Are you sure you know how it is possible for a man to be in two places at one time? Is it not rather that you know now that a man can be?"